Bye. Hello, Jody Raynsford. Hello, Do-Badders. How are you all doing?
Hello, David Hellard. Hello, listener and viewer and anyone else. Or imagine if someone put this, hello, human of the future. Imagine that someone decides to put one of these in one of those capsules, those time capsules. Do you remember like when they used to do that? Like on Blue Peter and stuff, they go, oh, we're going to put this thing in a time capsule. And then they dig it up like 30 years later. I'm sure that is not the point because we have a complete record of everything. So I just wonder whether that someone at some point will put this in a time capsule. In fact,
I mean, I can answer that. No.
Isn't there a project that, like the British Library has a record of every publication published in Britain. It keeps everything. Like when we on the magazines I used to work on, we used to have to send everything that we printed to the British Library as well, so that they'd have copies of everything. I mean,
published is probably they've probably had to redefine what they view as published now.
Oh no, exactly. I mean, yeah, but I don't know if it probably doesn't work for online because you don't need to do that. But I wonder if there is someone like have seed banks as well, so they're keeping seeds, things like that. I wonder if it's like someone's collecting like audio in that kind of way. There's got to be something that's going to preserve this forever. And then something horrific will happen and there'll be some kind of Holocaust. And this is the first thing that they find and think that the whole of society was defined by the type of conversations that we have. Imagine that.
I mean, what a future world where they're going to live in, where everyone's a drug cheat. Everyone's, no one's doing the full course. They're all doing.
We have to talk about that. We haven't talked about that. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about fuck up straight away. You're talking about Eilish.
Oh, wow. Eilish. Well, I mean... Eilish. Yeah. There's, in some ways, there's not much to say just because it's just so sad, really. And she's taken it well, hasn't she? She clearly doesn't...
Oh, I don't know. I haven't seen a reaction. So listen, this is the news. Was it this... is it a Great Scottish Run? Was it 10K?
Yeah.
Great Scottish Run. Which
is insane. 150 meters short as well, which is quite a long way for a 10K.
Not even close.
Yeah, I mean that's 1%. That's over 1%.
Yeah. No, that's it. So what did she have? Was it British record, European record? She broke for that, was it?
It was both. Yeah,
both.
European and British, and I think it was her mum's record before, which made it almost more poignant. But I wonder if she actually...
so it was 150 meters short. Do you think sabotage was there? Do you think it was her mum? Yeah, competitive family. You wouldn't put it past them.
But the same happened to Callum Hawkins, where he lost his Scottish half marathon record. But it's quite... I think you'd know as a runner, wouldn't you?
I think no. You are more... The thing is, I think runners who have a very, very good, they're very, very in tune with their bodies, which I think you if you're a certain runner, you could do that. I can understand what you're saying there. You can understand that a feeling that something's too long or too short, and or something's not quite right. You have that sense, don't you? That kind of spidey sense.
Yeah, because you'd be running to a pace, and sure, your watch isn't always great, but you know when your pace feels right. And to suddenly be like, oh, wow, there's only... Because the intrigue is which kilometre you suddenly like, oh, wow, that was a quick kilometre. Was it? So just a real shame, really. And
I want someone to sue someone. Like, why do people not sue? Like, it's like, this is your job. We say this every time. This is your job. Like, what is the fucking point? If you're not even going to get the course measure, like, what have they said that they don't know where the issue was?
Well, the chief executive of Great Run said that the area of the course was not laid out in line with previously agreed plans. So I'm not sure exactly, because it doesn't. I'm just trying to find in here the details, but it doesn't explain exactly which point. But Eilish seems pretty. When I heard her on the radio, she seemed pretty relaxed about it, and I think she wasn't that. I guess in some ways she's probably. It's long enough ago that she's not thinking, "Oh, God damn it." And fair play, but it is. Well, who knows about this? Who can tell us? Who's a marshal who's actually laid a course? Because if you look at the route that it took, it follows roads, and none of it seems to be an out and back where you turn around at
and that's always the way, isn't it? Brighton, when Brighton fuck up, it's always where the out and back. They have put the cone a little bit too far or not, and it's always that point, isn't it? It would happen at the Brighton half, Brighton full marathon. It's the bloody.
And someone moves a cone or someone, and you can understand that. Whereas this route follows, it seems to follow roads or paths, and so you can't just suddenly go 5 meters into a building where you weren't going to before. So the start, so I don't know where it would have happened, because the start and the finish, you think that's the bit you make sure you get right, because that's the one you're very aware of. The distance here is very easy to change along the road or in the park. So, but can someone who's a course marshal get in touch and just explain like how hard or just how easy is this to do? Because shaving off a few meters, fair enough, but 150 meters is quite a lot on a 10K.
Very rounded off, isn't it? Exactly 150 meters. That's very interesting. The other thing, it's one of those things where, I don't know how close the chief executive of the Great Run series is connected to, the day-to-day of it. I know that, in a lot of races, as the race director. No, exactly. But it's got just how frustrating that must be. Like, there's literally nothing that, I mean, it's ultimately you are the chief exec, but you're like what is broken in our entire things, where the thing that we get wrong is the thing that literally defines the event, which is the distance. Yeah. And if we get the distance wrong, it's like there's an existential crisis in that. So it's not a 10K. You're like, it's unbelievable. So I just think we live in an era of fake news. They should just make up shit now. Just like, because its point is meaningless, doesn't it? What he said, it's not the pre-existing. You're like, we've heard all that crap before, haven't we? Like, just make up something. Just go, building moved or something, or tectonic plates, or And people are like, what? You just leave. I'm like, I don't want to take any more questions. That was it. Just like make up some shit now, because it's so boring.
Blame Garmin. Just say they've changed the satellites. They've moved the satellites.
Blame Ukraine. Blame Musk. Yeah. Like, there's just. They should start winning a prize. What they should do is every one of those races doing it should get sued or banned from doing something, because it's about time that kind of. This has happened so much. Why is there no comeback?
Yeah.
Why is there no comeback?
Or why isn't there just one person who takes his wheel out and goes?
Do those people still exist?
They must do. They should. I mean, if not, they need them, right?
I know. Bring back. It's like I went to Sainsbury's the other night. Didn't have anyone on the checkouts. It was all. What's it called? Scan it yourself type thing. They've gone too hands off. We need to get old school again.
Yeah,
that guy, just get the guy out and do it. He'll, get prisoners to do it. I don't know, just whoever's going to do a better job of whoever's doing it now. Honestly, it's the same person who's responsible for all of these. Just goes round to different races and scuppers them.
They're just losing their eyesight. That's all it is.
Should have gone to Specsavers.
Yeah. But what we were gonna, we've got bad stuff, but we've got a lot of content we haven't done. We've never talked about the USA trip, and that was partly because we were going to talk about quartz, which we've now talked about. And but shall we do a catch up, or does it feel no one gives a shit now about the States?
No, I think we should. No, because you're going to Madeira next week, aren't you? So let's hear about the States. Because we talked about Pikes Peak, we talked about the legend, we talked about how important it was as a race and everything. Did it live up to the hype? That, what was it like there? Because again, it's one of those things where we talk about, we don't really have much of an insight into the, we have Americans on and stuff like that, but we don't have the experiential insight into what that scene is like and everything. We're kind of getting a sense of it, but you must have been like that's one of the big established, well-known races that mean something to Americans.
Well, I'm trying to think the last time that I went to a race where I thought this should be a bucket list race.
Oh, really?
I'm not saying I'm not revealing it but do you know when you go to someone, you think, especially if you go to a new continent, and there's a disconnect between American and European trail running. So quite often you can go to a country and a race that individuals think are incredible isn't quite up to the standard of other races, but it's just they're proud of it and it's their local. Yeah. But yeah, Pikes Peak is pretty special, gotta say. I'd say to people, put it on your. Yeah, I think it's got to be up there. If you're to choose a variety of races in the world,
the steep one, is it in terms of steepness and like
just in terms of altitude? I can't think of any race that's comparable. That's a mainstream race. Yeah, because you hear of, you've got the Everest Marathon, and people have to hike up. Altitude's a factor. It's an altitude. But it's the whole point of the race is you're at the highest point, and it's such a niche race. So to have such a mainstream race where you start at 2,000 meters, you go up to 4,000, 3,300 meters. And speaking to Andy Wacker, who's done it a few times, he was saying, no matter what you do, the last 3 miles, everyone's screwed, and you just can't. I mean, I've not really been at altitude a huge amount in my life. We hit it in Afghanistan when we were about 3,300 meters. There's not anywhere in Europe you can really go high altitude race, like, other than going up. So to start at 2,300 or so, and it completely changes the race, because typically you know how to pace your race, right? Mm. But what do you do when the back end of it is absolutely going to screw you no matter what?
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. Altitude is one of those things that it's not. I was about to say it's a great level. It's not a great leveler, because people just respond in different ways, and you don't. Yeah. And unless you're training in it on a regular basis, you don't know what your body does. And so I suppose there's a local advantage, or there's an advantage depending on what your background and where you're coming from and stuff like that. But it throws in. I suppose it throws in a variable that transforms the race into something different.
And we only did half of it, because the big race of Pikes Peak is normally the marathon, and because Greg, who was organising Golden Trail, his vision was to create a road trip where people could go to America and race 2 races, while only taking kind of 2 weeks off to be in America. Yeah. So to do that, and that's partly why we went to Norway for Strandfjord, so that people could do Strandfjord and Sierras and Owl. And Strandfjord was only a half, for exactly the same reason that in Pikes Peak we only did the uphill. It meant that people could then race the next weekend still, and so. particularly if you're doing it was just the Pikes Peak ascent, which is all uphill from start to finish, like a huge amount of climbing given its altitude. And because it's all uphill, it has less impact on your legs, because if you think about when you're running downhill, you get all that gravity going into it, and you get the reverse when you're running uphill. Your legs just don't get trashed quite as much. And particularly when you're at altitude, you just can't run hard enough. But it was the crazy thing about Pikes Peak, though, and there's this cloud over it, because one of the former
metaphorical
runners,
or actual,
often, yeah, both. But Matt, the previous winner, this guy called Matt Carpenter, and he's a local legend. So he's won it, I think, 12 times off the top of my head. And one of those times, his time was so significantly faster than any other time he's run it. And we talked about this, haven't we? I was going to say there's this element to it that was going to play out, and about the local runner who was a champion essentially. Yeah, but I don't think we've spoken about it on the podcast properly, have we? Because in some ways it casts this shadow over the race, in that people can't. There's no chance someone's going to break the record. Yeah, and I've no idea what the truth is of the matter. And I know that Matt is incredibly good and he's won 12 times, but then he's got one time that's 15 minutes faster. And having spoken to people, I still have no idea whether this is a legitimate time or not, because he was rumored to have spent like weeks and weeks camping out at altitude and just going up and down, up and down, up and down. And you realize how much an impact that could have genuinely, when you see the results of people and how much people change. So Remy was on for the record by halfway and realized there was no chance he was going to get it, because as the altitude was kicking in, he was like, yeah, there's no chance. I'm going to do the altitude bit at the same pace. So there's this weird, there's this weird question mark around that time, because it's such an outlier, even for him, that almost ruins the race. But also, if he genuinely did run it that quickly, ruins it for his reputation and for him. And so there, I have been told that the person in second had suggested there had been some aggressive cornering involved, but I've no idea whether there was or not, and no one will ever know if there is or not.
I mean, that's some aggressive cornering, isn't it?
Yeah, but then when you get to,
but is it the kind of, that's the thing though. So not having, so we mentioned all this before, but now you've seen it. You've seen what it's like. You've seen the terrain, the reality of it. Like, does it feel as though that aggressive cornering would be possible to that extent? So possible. So possible. And you're talking to the aggressive cornering king. I know. I was going to say that you what is an aggressive corner to me is probably very light to you. You're like, that's not an aggressive corner. yeah, you're just leaning in at that point. Yeah, exactly. But that's because, and this also, this was a point that I found fascinating, the difference in cultures between American and British, or certain elements of running culture. So when I was out there, I was doing these little video clips, because we were trialing to see whether we should do some TikToks, some more live content about me being there for. You were doing some dancing, were you? Doing some dancing, exactly. So what's it called? Some trends, some audio trends that you would like. Oh, finger and pulse, absolutely firmly on there. Ripe old aged, grey-haired man, right on the pulse of these trends. But so when I was coming down, we had to get up super early, because we need to get to the top and then hike down to the point where we were filming. Yeah. And we were coming down and we're cutting some corners off. Wait a minute. Did you have to walk up there?
No, thankfully.
You helicoptered.
You could drive, and this is
America. You could drive up a mountain, yes.
And that was a crazy thing about Pikes Peak and almost the American experience.
Rob Young has it. I was surprised. Rob Young could have had a record there if he'd have focused it on it.
He really could. I mean, there's a train to the top, and there's also there's a train to 4,300 meters. There's also a race that's just called the Pikes Peak race, which sounds like an insane motor race because it's really steep switchbacks and deadly at times in this race where they just race up it as fast as they can. But we got to the top and there were people up there with oxygen masks who were going up because... And even at the top, there's this restaurant where you can have hot donuts, and there was like hot chocolate with vanilla flavoring and coffee that's got all this creamed vanilla mix, and you're like, what is one of the most beautiful locations, which should be the absolute mecca for health, where you can do it by getting a train, getting to the top of your oxygen, and then loading up on donuts.
So basically, it's another level of Snowdon, really. That's what it is.
Yeah. And that's the strange thing about trail in the States, is that trail is almost this. It's not wild, I really hadn't realized it's like it's almost like a theme park where you can drive around in these you can have a tour guide driving you around in a little van, like the type you get in a Disney World, and you sit on the back and you drive around the trails and you go to these beautifully manicured trails. And we got in trouble because, so on the way down, I followed some trails that it turned out weren't the trail. And I'm like, oh yeah, you could just go straight up this mountain if you wanted to. And I found a bottle of water that had been left on the side. I was like, this is clearly someone who's thinking, I'm going to come up here and I'm getting this water later. So someone had clearly been planning aggressive cornering. But when we were then coming back, because we needed to get back up to the top and get our footage downloaded as soon as possible. So we were cutting the trail ourselves, and we then got absolutely bollocked by someone. And they're like, what the hell are you doing? Get off, you're off the trail. What are you doing off the trail? And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm off the trail. And it was more the tone at which I was attacked was as if I was some vandal. They're like, you're ruining the trail. Look at this bit. The trail now goes here because so many people have come off the trail. And for this person, this was the biggest sin. It's like slicing up the Mona Lisa by going off the trail. And it had never occurred to me that would be how it was seen or portrayed or the culture. Whereas in my head, it was like, yeah, isn't this cool? We've created this new trail because everyone wants to cut the corner.
The national park, they don't like that. In any national park, they don't like it. Like you stay on the fucking like walkers and stuff, like coming off the trails and shit like that. Like,
but it depends, because if you go to the fells, the race is get to the top of the fell, get back down, any means possible, any route possible, and then the routes become the routes that people take. So actually, once you are in a landscape, or say you're in,
but this is a tourist route as well, isn't it? This isn't this is a tourist route. Like if you go on any tourist route in the Lake District, if you're walking off the path, that is a bad thing. That is really looked down upon, because it's the volume of thing. I think fells are fine, aren't they? Because they're normally routes and stuff that you're never going to get a bloody busload of pensioners walking up together in their so I suppose it's because it's a tourist route, isn't it? That's the issue.
And as soon as I realised that, we then stuck to the trail, and were like,
as soon as I realised that, I still carried on doing it.
I was then sorry mate. But also
British.
But also it's a route where one of the runners got completely lost because it's not marked, weirdly, because it's so well manicured in some ways. They don't put signs up to say what the trail is for the race. And so one of the runners, I won't say who because they were involved in high places, got completely lost and was then worried it was going to cost them their position, and managed to get back on trail. They've no idea whether it was faster or slower. I think they lost time, and it wouldn't have mattered anyway. But it's quite nuts where you can see it, and if you look up from the bottom of the tree line, there's all these kind of manicured switchbacks, which you could quite easily just cut a few of them off. And when you're at that level, the time difference would be massive. But also this person, the record holder, has lived up there, it seems, and was living in this hut. And if you were used to the altitude of 4,000 meters, you could just carry on running at the pace that you had before. So it is possible.
So I was just trying to think there, like, so they specifically say that you have to stick to the trail. If you come off the trail, then you are cutting corners. Like, I know that there's a cultural thing. Okay, there's okay. Yeah, so it's like, okay, all right then. So that it's that explicit. Okay. Yeah.
And so that's the thing. It almost ruins this question mark over the best time is super unfortunate, because either they have gone off, they did do aggressive cornering that one time, and we've now got this PB course record that probably will never be broken.
Yeah.
Or that didn't happen, and the poor person is having this question mark over them when they should just be celebrated, particularly because they own a custard shop, a frozen custard shop downtown in Manatee Springs, and everyone knows to go there and to try the custard, and it's bloody delicious as well. So yeah, it's one of those races that they put up a £10,000 prize if you beat the record, and you're like, well, that's great.
Could we just go back to the custard thing? So, like, are you saying that if he ruined his reputation, his custard reputation might go with it? Is that
they'll have to put him in custard? No, we don't want to do custard jokes.
No,
yeah,
it's just desserts.
It's just desserts.
Yeah, we got this.
Well, it's more because I think it's just more,
because the thing is, right, if it's a local thing, like I'm going to equate Killian with cheating here, and I don't mean to. I'm just making a point for this, but it's like, Killian going and doing the Bob Graham and knocking a huge amount of time off it, and we know he didn't cheat or anything else like that. But if he wasn't well known, he didn't have all that, and he did that, then and then he comes along and then buggers off again. Like it would feel dirty, wouldn't it? And you could kind of get away with it because you're not coming back, you're not in that community, whereas he is right in that community. So like cheating would totally, like you say, totally fuck him.
Yeah, and it was one of the early races where you could imagine maybe he didn't know the rules, maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but so that's to Pikes Peak is one hell of it was brilliant race actually. So, and
so you're saying that the way that they did the race, they did the ascent. Like, if no race in other forms, then can you do both?
You then run back down. So you then go from the peak and go half marathon down 2,000 meters, which would be. And we were having issues because we'd been up there for so long, and we came from the UK, flew out there, went straight to the top, had to wait. And then by the time we were hiking back up, we'd been at altitude for 5 hours. And so I was getting quite spun out. So I took some caffeine, but that in some ways just sent me doolally, because I was then spun out, but like buzzed. So actually I felt like I was tripping a little bit by the time I got back up to the top. It's bloody hard.
Well, can you tell that on the video? Like, is there a very clear delineation between before and after?
No, because we didn't at that point. The content then isn't relevant to the recap because the race is finished and right. But then I'd taken up some drinks with me because I wanted to do the world's highest beer mile
Oh, okay.
So we then got to the top, and Luke, who's the cameraman, was desperate to be like, no, we've got to go. We're getting so much trouble with Pet because we need to download our footage. I'm like, honestly, it's going to take 10 minutes maximum. It's going to be fine. So I then did it out the back of a car, absolutely freezing at altitudes. And the issue is, with less pressure, the gas goes crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God, they're the fizziest beers I've ever had.
And what beers were they?
Some random local bottles I got. But it was just so hard to do because you're just burping up constantly. But I was out of shape, out of running, out of drinking practice, but just super fun to do. So
is that world record? Was Guinness there for that?
Yeah, sadly not. Sadly, no.
Oh no, Norris McWhirter didn't turn up. And
Norris was he didn't get his ticket for the train. So
oh right.
But I think I now have done the world's highest beer mile potentially, which is quite fun. So but yeah, so that race happened, and it was brilliant because there was a real battle of how will the Europeans stack up against the Americans. There were quite a few big name field Americans who were fantastic, proper race. So that happened. We had the issue with quartz, which we have mentioned, I think, on the previous episode, or we're mentioning on a future episode to do with quartz. But when you're away, you forget how much harder it is for people, because when the Americans come over to race in Golden Trail, they're having to race in the morning at like 7 o'clock sometimes in the morning, say UTMB or Mont Blanc Marathon, which for them is like 1 in the evening. Whereas us going to the States is perfect because you just get up early and it's like racing at lunchtime. But you forget how much of a difference it makes, kind of home and away advantage for if you're living somewhere.
Yeah.
And the night before, all the food had been organised to be delivered. They turned up with no rice. So the night before the race, the entire of the European group didn't have any carbs in their meal, and they then had to wait an hour for rice to be delivered when they're wanting to go to bed. So you forget small things like that.
Yeah,
make a massive difference to. And the runners were saying they were getting bad backs because at the end of that run they've done. Well, how long did it take them? Just constant climbing the whole time. So your body's in a position that it's not used to being for that length of time.
What, kind of like hunched over? Your back's like not straight, or like yeah. And
that's something you just wouldn't consider as being an issue.
Like, fuck, what? I thought being outside and doing all this is supposed to help you healthy. None of this sounds healthy. They got bad backs. There's people need oxygen when they get to the top. There's cakes up there. Like, what the? This sounds terrible. This is a terrible advert for health.
Yeah, indeed. But so I'd say to people, like Pikes Peak, put it on your list of things to do because it's a beautiful area. But
how do Europeans, like, I think in Britain we bridge the gap quite easily. We could see the Americans for what they are. They love doing things in a certain way, and we expect something of of the European. We know that they're very stuck in their ways about how they want to do so. But what kind of sense do you get, like, when those two things meet? Like, it must be for some of those European runners to go, like, to see that that's what's happened with Pikes Peak. They must, because the majority, I don't imagine that there's any kind of like trail runners and stuff like that who aren't also like very environmental in the way they think, and caring about natural environment and things like that. It just seems to be a general trait of the of that community. So when they see that, I mean, like, did you get a sense of that, or does everyone just not say anything?
Sorry, say again. I missed the start of the question.
About the way that European runners feel about the setup in America, like the fact that you have these like beautiful locations and things like that are kind of ruined by this like the commercialization of it. Like, well, how do they ever respond to that? Do you ever get a sense from them that that it's almost against the whole idea of nature and everything else?
Well, it's just very I didn't really get from individuals, but we could tell because on the trip we were at Pikes Peak, and then we had this week in between where it was a proper road trip where Greg had booked a MTV pimped out mansion with 2 swimming pools, table tennis, table football, just the most incredible place in Moab.
Table soccer, I think you find it, isn't it?
Table soccer, indeed. And we'd go to a run where they've like smashed steps into bricks, into rocks at times. And so they've gone in there with this heavy machinery and created this trail, a nature trail. And then it's like, don't go off the trail. Don't go on that.
You might ruin it.
Don't go on that. And you're like, you've just been in with these huge. And so there is this weird contradiction, but you get it at the same point because they don't want everyone to go everywhere. And so they then create an area that everyone can go. But to do that, they
have to destroy the natural habitat.
Yeah. And so there is an oddness to that. And I guess it's something we just don't have. We've never had to face because in Europe, everywhere has been so, there's been human beings everywhere for so long, crossing everywhere, making these trails and routes that they already exist. So we don't ever have to create trails or create places people to go to.
Yeah.
So it is just a very different way of thinking, but it was quite strange where we'd be filming and there'd be certain places that you're not meant to take photos. So I'm not going to climb on because it could be dangerous. And we're like, right, everyone on that, it's going to be a cool shot. Let's run it. And just the footage. And that was the crazy thing about this trip is that on the days off, when you go for a jog, you're then surrounded by 8 incredibly talented camera runners who are filming and shooting you in the most incredible landscape, just making everyone look incredible. So the footage from the trips for individuals is amazing. And I think they're quite clever in that they realize that the draw of something like the Golden Trail isn't just, can I win a big race? It's you can travel for 2 weeks, all expenses paid, to some of the most amazing landscapes in the world.
Yeah.
So we then went and poor Anders, who is great guy from Norway, he gets there, and on the first day of landing, he catches COVID.
Oh no!
So he has to isolate. He has to isolate for pretty much the whole trip, where we had.
What does that mean in America? So, I don't imagine it means it's as stringent as it is.
Well, he had to book separate accommodation and stay in the accommodation.
Right. And
then he was in a car that he was driving $300 worth of booze to the next venue because he had storage in his car. So he had this huge party in the back of his car that he just couldn't attend. So the poor guy was in America, and you're not allowed to go out and see. You can't do sightseeing. You can't go to these areas of beauty. I don't think he's meant to stay in his room. So unbelievably tough. 7 hours of driving solo as well. Yeah, crazy. But we then go to and thrift stores in America. Have you been?
I've not been. I don't think I've been to a thrift store at all. I've been to America lots, but I don't think I've ever been in a thrift store.
Wow, you forget because America's so big that some of their shops are insane. So you'll have thrift stores the size of apartment stores. So you go in and there's, Macklemore. No wonder he did this song. But for our party after the first race, everyone had to go to the thrift store and just buy clothes. It was incredible. Everyone had the most amazing fancy dress, and it kicked off big time where one of the runners ended up cracking their heads open and worried they were going to fall asleep and not wake up, even just because they were that drunk. And and has this lovely scar on the back of their head now. One of the runners was suggested they should leave the bar because
what?
They were they basically scaled the bar and were at the highest point in the bar dancing, and then threatening to do like a swan dive into the crowd.
Oh my God.
You know, and you think, this is brilliant. These are normally quite serious runners who you get a few drinks with them and all hell breaks loose. But then that was on the Saturday night, and on the Sunday night, we then tried to go out, and so the next week we tried to go out. None of us were allowed in because we didn't have passports. So they'd organised a party.
Oh yeah, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
None of the runners could get into.
It's so ridiculous that. Oh, it's just so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, can't you use any discretion at all? I mean, it's just, there's some things in America that you just are just like, I've seen like a 70-year-old man turned away at a bar because he hasn't been able to produce a proof of ID. You're like,
yeah,
oh, it's just insane.
Yeah, it's absolutely.
But have a gun.
Yeah, it's just super weird. But the thing that really struck me when we were out there was how hard it is to be healthy.
Oh, it really is.
Yeah,
it really is.
And because a lot of the food we were while we're on the trip was they go to a supermarket, they buy a whole load of crap, and they put it in their houses, and you then make your own food. So I was trying to at one point be healthy. So I had peanut butter, or not even nut butter. It was almond nut butter on toast. I couldn't believe how it tasted like a pudding. And if you look at, so I looked at food labeling in the States, it's so unuseful.
Yeah.
Where it tries to present, and I hadn't realized this before. So in the UK, we have our portion size, which is a joke because the manufacturers can decide the portion, but you have to put in your 100 milligrams breakdown so that no matter what it is, you can look at and think, this is high fat, this is low, this is high sugar, this is high salt, this is high sugar, whatever it may be. In the US, they get to decide the portion size, and they just tell you how much is in each portion. So you've got no way, unless you actually do the maths of calculating the weight of the whole package and then looking at the portion size and doing the maths, which can be quite hard. You've just got no way of knowing if something's high fat, high sugar. And so the bread was 10% sugar.
Oh, it's just ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, and this was like a whole wheat. Everything on it looked like it was healthy, and so I realised I had everything that the peanut butter, also the nut butter, all that. Like, it's so hard to be healthy when all your food is just hidden oils and sugar. Yeah. And then even
there's
when
no way of telling, there's no way of you having that information to be able to find out.
Yeah, and you have to drive everywhere, and so there's just no walking unless you drive to the trail to go for a walk.
Yeah, so, that's it.
and it really made me realize how lucky we are in some ways, just that we've got such a network of pavements, but that our food laws, our labeling laws, I've complained about elements of them in the past, but they are there to inform. Whereas in the States, they're there to try and pretend they're helpful.
Oh, that's it. It's all beholden to the different lobbies. It's so corporate interests are just so powerful there. Like, to get things like that through is just like I say. I do think as well in America, like it's slightly different, but talking about the trails and everything as well, which I think that when you have like natural trails like the ones in Europe and stuff like that, you also have villages in the natural place that they'd be, and things like bars and pubs and stuff like that, which you don't get in America. Like, you don't have a trail where you could go, oh look, there's a natural endpoint where a pub would be or where someone would be, because it's a halfway point and stuff like that. So you have to drive everywhere. That's the thing, isn't it? You go, we're going to go to a bar, we're going to drive there. We're going to go to a trail, we're going to drive there. Like, you're driving to everything. Doesn't matter what you do. There's no connectedness of doing it. That's it.
Yeah, completely. And so, and you don't know how they're ever going to be able to unpick that, really.
Yeah.
Because the whole country is based off cars. But yeah, the second race, so the tour then went Manitou Springs, incredible, beautiful locations, but then went to Flagstaff, and that's when I actually was filming running downhill. And my God, that really gave me some respect for the runners, because what's the hardest you've tried to race downhill, or the fastest you've tried to go downhill?
I think it was when I was training for South Downs Way 100. Like what are the downhills there? They're nothing in comparison, but there are some bits that are quite steep, and so when you're training along that, you think, okay, I'm just going to try going hard downhill. And it's nothing compared. I mean, it's not fast at all. It's still, there's a technique, isn't there? There's a technique. I didn't when I was done anything in the Alps and stuff. Like, I've not tried to go fast at all, because it's fucking frightening.
Yeah, and because it was single track, the route I was running and filming, and so once I was there filming them, and it's really challenging actually as a camera runner when people are following you, because you need to stay at the right distance to be able to film them well. But also when you come off the trail, when you stop, some runners will follow you, and so you need to be able to come off in a way that you're not going to lead them into jeopardy. But what I hadn't appreciated, because I think as runners, when we hear about trails, like how technical is it, is quite often what people ask.
Yeah.
And you forget that actually the quicker you are, it's not just that you're faster runner. You've got to be able to take on board what the speed at which the trails.
It's that computation changing of where your feet are going and everything when you're going down. Like if you're going, yeah, absolutely, that's it.
And so because I was speaking to Francesco Pupi about it, who he's known as being less technical because he's partly because he's so fast at marathon distance and road running. And he was saying that, people would say to him, oh yeah, it wasn't a very technical trail. And like, yeah, maybe not for you at your speed, but try and take on all that information and at the speed I'm running. And running with these runners, because it's not the height of summer, the light was so low that I was really struggling to be able to see what was on the ground, because you've got, and it was a wood where it was quite a, it wasn't a natural density of trees, and which meant that there were shadows everywhere. And because it was so low, the shadows were really long. So I hadn't appreciated just how hard it is running on what would be like a relatively normal trail with rocks that you could normally just run in and you just move where your feet are. It's not a problem. But when you're moving that speed and you've got the shadows, you just can't make out where the rocks are and what is black because of shadow and what isn't. And so I just found it incredible actually, how talented these people are.
So when I was, and I think we spoke to people about this when I was on Men's Running, we were talking about downhill running and stuff, and not done it in any huge thing, but it was something that was talked about. And they're saying that, and this is where kind of like responsive in your footwear and everything is really important, that if you're going at a certain thing, it's almost as though you have to kind of switch off your thinking, because you don't want to your feet or your body to react, and you have to just let your like feet fly forward, and when they touch the ground, that they will do all the computations that you need in order to keep you. I was just like, it's too much to rely on at a certain age for your body to do those things. Like my body lets me down in lots of other things, so I'm not going to leave it to make those computations for me. And it's almost impossible to be not to like look at something and change. I don't know. Especially at that speed, the tiniest perceptions and things like that are going to make a massive difference. So it's horrible. And it goes really wrong because I've been in races where they're helicoptering people off mountains like constantly. So it comes to a point where when it goes wrong once, that's all it needs to do. It needs to just go wrong once, and it's the end of a race.
And I think in my head, just from previous races, the technical parts are normally you just think of downhill and steep, and I hadn't appreciated actually when something's incredibly winding and thin, then and you're moving that quickly, that becomes more of a challenge, because quite often the type of terrain we think of as being technical, you can see quite far ahead, whereas actually if you're having to come around corners and the trail is constantly changing left to right, it's not you don't get that chance to look ahead, and you've also got to be changing your balance really well and your speed without knowing what's coming. So yeah, I even though the Flagstaff race I wouldn't say was a classic by any means, try going out if you really want to train at technical. Try going out into trail when the sun is low, because everything changes. So that was our kind of American road trip. Just unbelievable. I don't know if they're going to do America each year. I don't know if Pikes Peak is going to be in the program as a classic for us to go to each year. But if you can go out there and race.
A casino at the top next time.
Yeah,
nice casino at the top. That's good. Get all your tuxes and stuff up on the train. Spend a bit of time up there. It'd be nice.
Yeah, and I mean, hoping, because trail running below ultra is so European dominated in culture, in the races, and hopefully that's going to change. And America's got so many more talented track runners who could be drawn into those distances. They should be thrashing everyone in 5 years' time. But at the moment, you stop being a runner or you go into ultra, really. So if they can just nail that distance in between, I could see there being Killian's times being challenged quite soon in the shorter distances.
Yeah. So and then the quartz thing was does the quartz thing, because the quartz thing we were talking about was in relation to
Pikes Peak.
Yeah.
So and that's the follow do batters. It might even be this weekend, I think, the episode coming out, but we try and explain quartz and the issues it creates, and it was really contentious in the States, and seems to be really contentious in the States as a side-by-side testing program to WADA. Well, that was the American trip. There's quite a few stories I can't tell that I'll tell you down the bar. Because it did get loose at times.
That's good. It's good. The thing is, what I like about that is the whole idea. The thing is with do-badders and stuff, you go in a race with do-badders and everything, there's a very mediocre performance by everyone. And then when everyone gets in the pub, the performance is still mediocre. When you have like these elite athletes, they get in the pub and you're like, this is territory that is unknown to them. They're on safe ground. Well, very technical ground. On safe technical ground, with the running, they get in the pub, and then, like you say, all hell breaks loose.
And shout out to the pub, actually. They, I've never seen.
What did you do? Like to go? Yeah, these guys, they were really.
Well, they had skis where they then had shot glasses attached along the skis. So you then fill up all the shot glasses, and you all do a shot at the same time, because it's raised in unison, which I've not seen before. Maybe that's common on skiing, but I just thought that was genius.
No, Now available for sale at the BBR merch store.
For all our keen skiers.
Do you know what? I like the idea of that. I like the idea that you could do that. It doesn't matter what time of year. We could have it all on a cricket bat for like summer. You could, there's lots of applications for that we can use.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, D-Badders, there we go. That's my American road trip. And
when we come back, we'll be able to. So, how long are you in Madeira for?
Going for a week. And what we're going to be doing while we're there, because we're running out of episodes now because we haven't had a chance to record that many interviews. So I'm going to be recording kind of a diary as I go, which will hopefully give you more of an insight into what happens behind the scenes.
What I want is I don't want some bullshit, here's some runners, here's some other stuff like that. I want you to go full Hunter S. Thompson, Fear and Loathing Las Vegas, like gaffer taping a microphone to your face. And that basically, no matter what happens, it's all captured on there. I want the morning, I want the afternoon, and I want the full evening. I want to just no visuals, just sound. Like, what the hell is going on? I want that full experience.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to film people in the bar, and it's Halloween is the night of the party. So I'm going to be going dressed as Quartz as my costume. So as a Quartz tester. So that could be popular. Could get me fired, but we'll see.
What does a Quartz tester look like? Is it quintessential garlic around his neck, a baguette? Is that? It's just the.
That's quite. I should add that, shouldn't I? I should add the French elements, the French.
Oh, absolutely.
French racism as well. Yeah. Perfect.
Loads of paperwork, just loads and loads of paperwork that you just throw away as soon as you get it. That's what you want.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I've got to go and go to a tequila cocktail night, so I need to run away. But anything else to cover while we still have a chance?
I don't think we do. We were going to talk politics, but let's not bother now. Like, we might have a different. By the time we're going to have a different. By the time we speak, we're going to have a different prime minister again. We'll have changed prime ministers. In between episodes. So, who are you rooting for? Boris coming back? Is that?
I mean, that would be one hell of a comeback, wouldn't it? He's basically had a summer holiday, 6 weeks off.
I know. It's almost as though it was planned, doesn't it? There's part of me just going, I want him to come back just because people will just go crazy, and not for any good reason apart from that. Just because I just think it's the most chaotic thing that can happen. And now I quite like the chaos. Like Radio 4, when Liz Truss resigned, like Radio 4 was just wonderful to be listening to that day, because everyone's kind of given up. There's like no impartiality anymore. People are just going, this is total chaos. It was just so enjoyable. Like they all kind of like, which is also horrific because, we're in the midst of so many crises.
And if he does return, he's going to think he's even more like Churchill.
I mean, it's just, the whole thing is just... he's probably written it. He's probably written it up already. He's written his biography in the future. It's incredible.
Well, D-Badders, thanks for listening. If you've got guest suggestions, as soon as we get back, we're going to start cramming in a shitload of them because we've run out of episodes.
Oh, and we've also got some, after we did the streaming session into the group, we're going to have a couple more of those as well, which we're going to give plenty of notice for. So it'd be really good with those ones. Get in the group and come on to those live as well. But let us know actually with those, like, what kind of times do you prefer? Do you prefer them like, sort of 5 o'clock, 8 o'clock, when are kind of the best times to do that would make you more likely to rock up and answer questions live?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for listening, guys. And we will, if you want to leave a review, the buzzword for this
quartz.
Have we done that already? Or
I don't know, you might have done it. I don't know.
Frozen custard. In trust we trust.
Trust we trust.
In trust we trust. Got to get that somehow into your review. So see if you can leave a review with that in there. And
I think we're just putting people off doing reviews now. It's just got to that stage.
Couldn't get worse. Couldn't get worse.
Exactly.
Well, thanks for listening, guys, and we will speak to you next time.
We'll see you later.
Bye 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 bye.
Fuck you, buddy.